It was fun. It was kind of intimidating. Again, we were kind of unsure, but what we did is we had syncs with the smart folks we knew, including our manager there in the back, and then kind of made decisions on the fly. What we ended up with was a new general paradigm for how we wanted to approach components in general. And so now the sites tend to operate on most pages are a singular blank page with the Chrome. Header, footer, stuff like that, and then one or two very open whatever. So the two chunks tend to be your hero area and general, and then we have a number of components that are available to be drag and dropped into the hero area, and then your primary content area. And we have a massive number of components that can be dropped in there as well. We also decided that instead of doing deep nesting, to help maintain some of the brand guidelines we have, to help maintain some of the ease of authoring that we were pursuing, we decided to go with content level components, where you're dragging the entire section of content onto the page, adding in the content that you need, and then configuring layout options depending how you want it to look. So I skipped ahead a little bit, but this is an example. This is one of our hero components, where in this case we have a large rectangle. You drop in a background, you've got your header, you've got some subtext, you've got a call to action. All of this is pretty configurable. We can go left, right, top, bottom, one CTA, two CTAs. We can have content in the foreground. We have content in the background. We can have modal videos that pop up off the CTAs or static links. It's pretty open. Here's another example of the same banner, the same component. And so what they do is they'll drag it in here. In this case, they have two CTAs, a primary call to action and a secondary one. We've centered the text up top. Vertical alignment, anything like this, it's fairly straightforward. We're also moving to make some of these options universal, very global, so that it's just general text alignment or vertical alignments. Here's another one. This one, what we did was we took a copy of the banner that we were just looking at, and we had a specific use case where we wanted to allow people to sign up for an app and receive the app download link in their phone. So we extended the banner and then just added our SMS functionality here. Very similar. The author sets this up in a very similar way. In this case, there's a little bit of extra added crazy because there's different fields whether you're on iPhone or Android or Windows. But ultimately, you get the gist that this is a very similar component that handles a lot of our heroes. Some of our other content blocks span a variety of contexts. In addition to the standard campaign where we're marketing, say, a particular product, we also have a number of event websites. So our Talent Solutions arm of the business hosts a number of events each year. One is Talent Connect. We have Sales Connect, Brand Connect, Tech Connect, a number of events that are hosted constantly. And so this is an example of an agenda component, where each of these line items is now a configurable session that is included in a singular block level component. Again, with header, subtext, and then these are, I think, Sling included at the time, but you select them as an author. You see very similar situations where this is a resource component. We have a number of different views on this. Sometimes they're viewed for webcasts, sometimes for PDFs, links, forms, you name it. In this case, we have a 3-column approach. Again, whole content block is one component with the heading, and then you choose which resources that you want to display. 2-column view, very similar. As you move forward, you start to see that you can build a pretty significant amount of content using very similar component frameworks. They also work well for other languages. I think this is either Spanish or Portuguese. This is a text and media block. It's very similar to our banners, but what we do is we use this to build story underneath our heroes. We have support video in this case. It's in French, but it's a modal video. We can also do slide share, embeds, anything that you might need through this same block. It also has options to swap it back and forth, to stack the text over top of the image. You can change the background on these as well, in case you wanted a different look. You'll notice this looks familiar to the agenda component themselves. This is actually a webcast. So for some of our sites that offer video support for either seminars or webinars, I guess is the technical term for them, we can put together a number of these situations where maybe there's more than one person speaking. We'll have multiple images show up. It's all based on who you pick as the speakers, and then you fill out the name and date. So you choose a speaker, and then it fills in all of the information for it. So at that point, I mean, I guess that's kind of where I'm going to stop off. But hopefully that helps give a little bit of background on why we chose CQ, how we've changed the way that we build our components, and the architecture that we're using. Hand it back over to Nate.
So I'm going to discuss some of the priorities that we have as we're building out, keeping in mind our main rule members first. So I'm going to talk about security, I'm going to talk about brand protection, talk about code progression, and company integration. So security being number one. Like I said, 277 million members. And hackers would love to get into that data, and they could see, our subdomains off stack as being sort of a backdoor to try and get in. So everything we do, security is number one. We have a process where to go to production, we have information security reviews every single line of code that makes it in. Beyond that, we completely XSS everything. So I guess we sort of treat our content authors as a potential threat, but every single thing they put into any input box, any path field, any rich text has to be XSS and encoded onto the page. No HTML, no CSS, no JavaScript is allowed. We validate all URLs, things like path field selectors. We've created some simple X types. So if they want to put in an image, it absolutely must come from the DAM. They can't insert a URL that points somewhere else out into space. Video components were a little more difficult, so they want to put in, like Will mentioned, modals. We allow services such as YouTube, Brightcove, SlideShare, which LinkedIn owns, and a few others. So what happens is, to make it easy on the content author, they go to YouTube, and where it says share, you copy and paste the link in. They can copy and paste the link from the URL. They can copy and paste the embed code, which is typically an iframe or whatnot. We do not inject that straight onto the page, and that's key with everything we do. So I run through some, regex. I pull out the ID, insert into my own iframe, and put that on the page. So the worst thing that happens is it might be a link to the wrong video, but they can't go rogue and put anything they want onto our sites. Brand protection. So Will showed you a bunch of our components. These are all approved by designers. Content authors, when they want to make a new page, they sit down with designers, they come up with designs which are approved and go into production. The components are built in a way that's very modular, so they do have a lot of options, as Will demonstrated, but every option is approved. They can't put in random links to logos. The logo has to be up in the corner by itself, no other logos near it. They can't put in any, again with XSS, they can't put any HTML or CSS. So back before I started, a couple of enterprising marketers might, put in some CSS to bump over text, do whatever they want to it, make it a different color. We have approved colors, and content authors aren't allowed to change that. One of the challenges with those big components is they are rather large. The dialogues are rather complicated. There are a lot of options. So it can be very overwhelming at first. So there are some downsides to it, but in the end, it's protection. They have any options, but again, it's all still within our control. Obviously, every day we're trying to progress our code base. So while the content authors are creating new pages and they're doing it like every day, we need to support their old sites while we're still, fixing bugs, upgrading, making things better. So we've done a few things. Some of the things that I've had the fortune to work on here in my 8 months or so is introducing our custom, what we call LI tags. It's just regular JSTL. But everything we do goes through the LI tag. So I have entrenched it with the XSS. So in the dialog, they insert like the header for a component or a CTA link. On the page, it goes through our LI tag and goes through our XSS protection using anti-SAMI. Not the exact XSS API filters built in to CQ. Found that a little limiting since I want to have different levels of protection. So I imported anti-SAMI, and I have different config files that I could run at different times. So we have the LI tags that the XSS uses, but also things like, say, an image, right? So we have the LI image. So instead of ever using an image tag, a regular HTML image tag, we use LI image. And that centralizes all our code and makes it reusable. So for instance, I just recently introduced that image lazy loading. And because all our image tags were using the LI image tag, one simple fix, one quick change in the tag just updated every single site, hundreds of campaign pages. So it made it very easy. The other thing I've been fortunate to work on is moving all of our components, the business logic from init. We basically have init JSP files, which are just included. So if you're familiar with .NET, it's kind of like having a code behind file, or a partial class. But in the end, it's still JSP, and it's still pretty much scripting and kind of spaghetti code-ish. So I'm moving it all to Java classes. Using reflection and some neat stuff, the component will initialize its own Java class, and we have a separation of our business logic from our presentation layer. It's getting closer to an MVC pattern. At that point, we're in the Java. It's easier to debug. It means we can do some more object-oriented programming. It means every component can extend from a base component class. So our code is a lot more reusable. And we're working on getting to some test-driven development. But this is going to make it easier. One of our biggest challenges is integrating with the company, the rest of the company. So the goal is that anyone can leave our team, go to another team, go work on the homepage. Someone from the homepage can come to our team, and they could get up and running very quickly. The challenge, of course, is we are the only team on CQ. Not everything on CQ lends itself to the way that LinkedIn does its stuff. For instance, CQ is built in with less, but we use SAS here at LinkedIn. So Brody got to work on getting SAS to work in CQ. We use Maven, the rest of the company uses Gradle. The way that CQ does I18N and translations wasn't robust enough for us here, so our engineering team built out their own translation system. A lot of the UI and CSS, so we want to be able to pull from our central repository, but our design is slightly different, so that's another challenge. Things like using the client libs in CQ, but LinkedIn uses like an inject or require JS along with Atomic to do all the componentizing of our JavaScript. We haven't gotten to that. We're still using client libs, and so this is going to be a challenge and a discussion to have. The build and deployment process is completely different from how the rest of LinkedIn works, and Brody's working on that right now, trying to get tied in with the central repository and a lot of the tools that we have here that our team at the moment doesn't get to take advantage of. We've come a long way. We've gotten a lot of their tools into our system, which is really neat, but we still have a long way to go. So when I say interfacing with stack, that's what I mean. Stack or network is the main site. Some of the things we've already gotten in, we got to use their user metric system, their tracking, a lot of their custom scripts. But again, we're still not fully integrated, whereas like when they update, we'll be able to pull in the automatic updates. So Brody's going to talk about a lot of the technical stuff that he gets to work on.
I'm just going to stand here because I'm looking around a little bit. I had an adventure over the weekend, moving house and falling. Sorry. So I'm Brody. I work with these guys. I'm fortunate enough to work with them. I want to talk a little bit about our dev process when we first got CQ and what we did to change it to make it a little bit more friendly. Given the fact too that, like Nate had mentioned at the beginning, we're web devs, and that is something that here at LinkedIn, anyways, it's very different. For example, web dev isn't under engineering. Web dev is under product. Engineering has their software engineers and they have their front-end engineers that take care of all the engineering stuff. Web dev is very product-oriented. Our stuff is CSS, HTML, and JS, but very, very hardcore to the point where it's like, oh, inline JavaScript makes my head like hurt really, really bad. Things like that. I'm trying to build the user experience really, really well, but then that kind of overflowed into looking at the way that our devs were working and realizing that that in itself was a bad user experience and what we can do to make it better and what we want to do to make it better. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So the old workflow that we had was like this image right here. It was kind of like square peg and round hole constantly, all the time. Basically, we had a SVN plus Vault interface. Prior to moving to CQ, we worked with SVN as our versioning control. And Vault was introduced by the vendor that we were working with. And it just so happened that a lot of the devday.com stuff that had documentation on it was how to use File Vault, and then how to hook up File Vault with SVN. And it's very, very rudimentary. If you search for File Vault or how to use it, you will get 10 of the same link to dev.day.com, and it will link to like version 5.2 to 5.6 of almost the same exact documentation on how to implement File Vault. It's so wonderful. SVN, there is inconsistencies between SVN 1.6 and 1.7, the way that SVN worked in general, and that was a problem because a lot of us were split up in terms of when people were starting, when their boxes had SVN installed on them, which boxes had SVN installed on them, which ones were on 1.6, which ones were on 1.7, and there was a lot of conflict between that. So getting everybody together there was something we had to do anyways, but that was one of the problems. Complicated workflow just for check-in and dev work. This was the old workflow. I'll explain a little bit. So basically, if I was to commit something or want to put something up into, let's say I'm ready to push something to prod, or push something to author production, right, for the authors to use, what I would do is I would get my checkout, I'd SVN up to pick up all of the new things. At this point, if I did what I thought I could do, where I would just Vault add all of my new stuff, Vault check in all of my new stuff, Vault will kick you back an error and say, hey, you need to update this first. So you run a Vault up. What you run the risk of is pulling down everything from inside of CQ based on your filter and having stuff that was already in Vault overwrite your new changes. So you Vault up, you sync it. Now Vault's happy. I can check things back into the JCR. Now I have to SVN up again to make sure that I pick up all of my changes again, to make sure nothing was overwritten. And then to go through all of the resolving, to throw out all of whatever extra cruff got thrown in there. If there was extra, there's like .dir files, .vault files, there's a bunch of different files that Vault makes. That's wonderful. And then of course Vault add, Vault check-in, and then pray that it works. There was a lot of, this was the basic model here, where devs would just check into trunk, and then one gatekeeper would have a checkout of trunk, and then they would go and keep that going. Of course, trunk development in itself lended itself to its own problems. If we had like multiple, for example, somebody on the team might be working on 10 or 15 different tasks, and that sometimes would mean, oh, I need to have 10 or 15 different checkouts because we didn't have the right infrastructure set up. And then this guy decided to join on as an intern, and he's like, hey, let me fix this for you. So he set up Git SVN and Vault. Git made versioning a lot easier. We use Git SVN as opposed to just straight Git because SVN allows us to interface with the review board tool that the company uses and keeps us kind of on that path of getting closer integrated with the company's tools. Also, it gave us visibility with the company because people finally got to see what we were doing. So that's something that we did. I chose the picture because it was much more like handling a small panda as opposed to dealing with the circle in a circle pig in the square hole. And then Ash joined. Oh, well, the problem was Vault was still a pain in the butt, and we wanted to get rid of it. Jim was working on some pretty awesome hotfix stuff where I would say something, save it, and then all of a sudden it was up and running in my CQ instance. I don't know how the magic worked, but we didn't get to pursue down there. When Ash started, his first day, he just turned around, took all our code base and threw it in a Maven repository. Very simple build. I'm sure a lot of people who are deving with it are familiar with the way that Maven development CQ works. Maven made deploying a lot easier. We went from an actual deploy step to just like a one-step build process. It was scalable, and he also introduced JUnit into the first additional Maven build. We don't really have a lot of tests there, but it's there. So basically, this was our new thing. So we had a Git repository. The devs did their thing there. Then we could push the auth. Auth just replicated to publish, just like normal. How do I make the laser pointer? Okay, so anyways, so the primary benefits were right in this area. The primary benefits were that we could get Archetype integrated. Archetype is our SAS library, and all of its Compass and glorified Nixon library goodness. We could get linting and unit testing into pre-deployed validation. And we could build and the cool thing was that Maven actually built into a deployable artifact. So the benefit here was that it makes it easier for automation, and it actually does lend us a little bit of flexibility when it comes to trying to get integrated with some of the stack systems for deployment and stuff like that. Just because a lot of them didn't really care what our code base did, but they did care about what we were deploying. Were we deploying straight from the code base? Because that was a problem. But the fact that we built into a deployable artifact that then could just get tossed anywhere meant that all of a sudden we had an open avenue to get integrated with systems that would give us stuff like deployment monitoring and other things that we just don't have the bandwidth or the tools to do on our own. Secondary benefits we look at in this area where branching made dev work easier for the devs. And Git had better conflict resolution, and pre-commit hooks is where we're looking at in terms of JS unit testing, making sure that people, or JS lint testing to make sure that people can't commit bad code into the Git repository period, and stuff like that. And then our future considerations are automated QA testing. We have Selenium scripts right now that we have automated QA that runs off of the automated QA system that LinkedIn uses, and we leverage that. There are some integration issues there, so if we can get it built into a way that we can run integration, or we can run our own QA testing or own QA scripts during build or deployment, that would help us a lot. Package verification after build and installs. If any of you are familiar with Maven, one of the coolest things is that Maven will build, and if your package builds and it puts it into your JCR repository or gets into your CQ instance, it can be installed and not work. So that's something that we've seen a little bit more of lately, so we want to do package verification. So I upload the package, and then I got to check, is it active or is it just installed? If it's not active, what's the problem? Further breaking up of our code into multiple bundles. Because we moved to Maven, we can take our big monolithic application and break it out into separate OSGI bundles if we really want to. For example, we have a bunch of configurations that would be great if it was its own bundle, so that if we need to make config changes to the site, we can deploy the config bundle without having to deploy the code base, without having to go through security and get any type of clearance for that kind of push. Build monitoring, so fallback or automated deploys and fallbacks, and pre-production cycles for integration. So like QA, continuous integration. We do have some stuff that runs. We have a lot of processes that run off of Hudson. So if we wanted to get into a larger automated integration and deployment cycle, we could, to the point where every week right now we run a deployment for marketing where we send out an email, we manually deploy everything, we do all that, but all of that could be handled automatically and give us 2 or 3 days of dev back to actually building the platform out or moving to the next project, whatever that is. And then finally, for all of this stuff, it's the one-stop shop for devs. The fact that back there, we showed that we changed our build process to a dot build. So for example, right now, I SVN rebase, or I get rebase, get all of my stuff, dot build, and then I can spin up a new instance. I can just unpack a new thing, and then I can install my application. I have up and running, and I can get up and running in like 15 minutes now, as opposed to it's like 2 hours before or something like that, which is still pretty awesome. So the fact that we have it up and I can get my instance up and running in 15 minutes means that what we want to do now is mature those scripts, take that build script, let people to do stuff like target deploying. I want to deploy to my author server. I want to deploy to my publish server. Service deploying, tagging for your commits, and just getting into the really nitty-gritty of being able to take control of our build process and kind of abstract it away from what we're actually doing in CQ and treat it as its own application. I think that was one of the biggest issues at first, was at the beginning when we received CQ, and given the kind of background that we had, it wasn't a clear path to abstract everything, all of the process, all of the dev, away from the actual application itself, just because everything lived there. Like, before when we were working at SVN and the third-party company that we were working with, they were literally doing all of their changes in CRXD, like, in our integration server. So that was another part of trying to resolve the conflicts there and then bring them back down into our code base and then put them into SVN. And we would spend a good 3 hours a day, you know, just resolving all of the stuff that they did and making sure that we didn't blow anything back. I mean, we've had people come back after 2 or 3 weeks to be like, oh, hey, what happened to my stuff? And it's like, oh, sorry. I did that once to somebody who just started, and I felt so bad because he was just like, no, I swear I did it, I swear I did it, I did it. And he showed me all the stuff, and I was just like, oh yeah, I must have got it overwritten, huh? And he's like, oh. And I was like, did you back this up? He's like, oh no. And I was like, oh. It's okay, it was an easy fix. So we'll do it again. But anyways, that's kind of where we want to take it. And then I just wanted to say thank you to everybody involved. I know this is a really big list. To be honest, when we first got CQ, it was Will and me. Yeah, it was Will, me, and Jeff. That's it. That's 3 of us. So it's definitely been something where we felt the growing pains very, very quickly, because a month into handoff, we were already getting pressure from higher ups, our stakeholders, in terms of why is it taking so long to spin this up? It's a CMS. It boggles my mind that it could take more than 3 weeks to put CQ up. It's supposed to be out of the box. Those were all of the arguments that we heard. And through just, you know, hard work and everybody working, we were able to build the team up to what it is now. But we wanted to rush through this actually so that we could get to Q&A, just so that everybody, if you guys wanted to actually ask questions, and actually you can bring Yogesh up for Q&A and all that stuff, right? Yeah, Yogesh, if you want to come up and do some Q&A and stuff. So,
talking about apps, which is Adobe is coming up with a couple of things for building apps. So it's good that you guys actually started long before everybody else. What was that plan? Because I think most of the discussion that we had today was around components, QA process, build process, whatever it took for you to understand to build a website and go forward. I think there was very little discussion on the apps.
So I guess, you know, to make sure that we're on the same page, the way that we approached the CMS on the whole was that what do we want to do with it, right? In this case, the goal was to build our microsites, and so the app in our mind was not necessarily like your phone app. It was the CMS in a bucket that allows people to build microsites, including how we address the authoring, how we did component management, how we basically put together all of our Java services and component backing. To us, we could then spin up a new app next to it to host an intranet wiki, and then another app next to it to host forums or a Stack Overflow style app. Our app, in the mindset of the team, was at least a collection of code that was going to be used and then reused to build all of these microsites. Does that kind of help clarify?
I was thinking that's what you were saying, but then you showed a picture with the iPhone or, so that's what I thought, maybe that's what exactly you were talking about.
So there is a level of that. We have a hard requirement that all of our sites be mobile responsive. So in addition to the layers of visuals that you saw when I was showing components, what we also have is the mobile views for each of those. All of them fold down. That specific component was actually on one of our campaign pages that was driving people to a mobile app that we have hosted and on our actual stack, as well as through the iPhone store and the Google Play store. So that particular banner, what you saw was accessing it via a desktop. In addition, there's versions of that where as you fold down the screen and we detect your device, it will change whether or not it's asking you for a phone number, because why would you want to enter your phone number on a phone, right? You just hit like, give me the app, right? And so that's what it does. It swaps out the phone number entry and puts in a CTA instead. Now, when it comes to changing the fundamental services that we provide to our users or the content that we're providing, we do tweaking, but it really is more of a traditional responsive. We're not changing the entire experience. However, that's something that we're always interested in digging in on and seeing how we can pursue that.
Thank you. At the product level, I mean, if you want to develop something like a CQ app using the Apple iFrame or something, you can use the phone gap integration with the CQ, but that is something we are not leveraging right now.
So how many of these microsites do you have running now?
Right now, we have about 2,500 user-facing pages. Now, when it comes to the specific microsites, it's domain-wise only a couple of dozen subdomains. So some of them are pretty robust. What we also find is some of our primary sites are translated into multiple languages, which is a whole nother bear in itself. If you've had to code for something that's in English and then have it also work in German, you know that you get like triple length words in your navigation, and you got to deal with stacking issues and everything like that. But yeah, we're around 2,500. As far as microsites, we have what we kind of classify as subsites. A lot of our event sites don't have a subdomain, but they have their own navigation structure, they have their own content, they have their own kind of like area off to the side that is, a couple dozen pages or whatever to make up what we would consider a microsite. So yeah, I guess that's where we land. This is not something where I think to like the scale of what you guys have going, we're not thousands upon thousands of pages.
So across those few, do you have a single design theme, single Etsy directory that you can enforce?
Yes.
So that's where, yeah. Where
We have a single Etsy directory, and we have multiple client libs, and then one of our devs was cool enough to go through and then